Hello, I'm Berkeley Mayor Jesse Edegui, and I want to warmly welcome you to the City of Berkeley's 20th Annual Holocaust Remembrance Day program. For the past 20 years, this event has brought together our community to remember the Holocaust and to recommit ourselves to ensure that it never happens again. This event brings together survivors, their grandchildren, faith and community members to remember the Holocaust and to honor the survivors. I want to thank Councilmember Susan Wengraf, Councilmember Sophie Hahn, and all the members of the Planning Committee for organizing this commemoration. Today, we have a beautiful program. I'm grateful that we can experience it together, even if virtually. As a city and as a community, we are united to honor the survivors, honor those who sadly perished, honor the liberators, and all of their family members. And I just want to call attention to the fact that today's event comes at a time of rising anti-Semitism and hate crimes, even here in the East Bay. It happens during a time of an alarming increase in Holocaust denialism. And we've seen the deadly consequences of this anti-Semitic and hateful rhetoric, including the 2018 Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We must speak out strongly and clearly against anti-Semitism and hate. It has no place in our community. And we must keep the memory of the Holocaust alive to ensure that it never happens again. Thank you.
I'm Berkeley City Council member Sophie Hahn, and I'm also the daughter and granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. It's my honor to be here today to present the City of Berkeley's 20th Annual Holocaust Remembrance Day proclamation. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic genocide of more than 6 million European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. And whereas the Holocaust was a crime of shocking inhumanity, targeting for persecution and death Jews and also Roma and Sinti people, those with mental illness and physical disabilities, homosexuals, Slavs, Poles, and members of anti-Nazi networks throughout Europe. And whereas this year's Holocaust Remembrance theme of remembrance and resilience emphasizes the need to remember and acknowledge atrocities of the past, acknowledge the strength and perseverance of survivors, and to heal and thrive in the present. And whereas false information on the Holocaust continues to deny and trivialize the truth of what took place during the Nazi regime, and for the benefit of past, present, and future generations, we must never forget the appalling crimes of the Holocaust. And whereas the purpose of Berkeley's Holocaust Remembrance Day is to join together as a community to remember the Holocaust, honoring survivors who chose to build their lives in Berkeley and the Bay Area, and to reflect on the need to join as one human family with respect for all peoples. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Berkeley hereby proclaims April 16, 2023 as Holocaust Remembrance Day, in memory of those who perished and in honor of survivors as well as rescuers and liberators. And be it further proclaimed that the City of Berkeley is committed to never forgetting the Holocaust and to combating anti-Semitism, racism, bigotry, and hatred in all forms.
Hello, my name is Dina Bookstein. Today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of Rita Greenberg Clancy, Director of Adult Services for Jewish and Family and Community Services of the East Bay. I am very honored to invite survivors and the family members of survivors to light memorial candles today, remembering their many loved ones who were murdered among the 6 million in their towns, in their forests, in their communities, in the death camps by the Nazis and their collaborators.
My name is Eva Lucas. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, and I would like to light the candle in memory of my father, who died on the way to the Mauthausen concentration camp, and also for my stepfather, whose name was Tibor Kellen, who helped me to become an engineer and also who suffered terrible atrocities during World War II.
My name is Alexander Schirman. I was born in 1929 in city of Taganrog, Russia. Right now I am living in city El Cerrito, California. I am lighting candle today in memory of my grandfathers, Moisei Schirman and Haskell Friedman, and my grandmother, Alta Friedman, who was killed during German occupation of Donbass and city of Taganrog. I am lighting my candle today in a memory on my father, Eleazar Schirman, who was killed when he was in army on front, and in memory of my late wife, father, Zalman Neustadt, and her brother, David Neustadt, who was killed when they were in army on front. And I light candle in memory of my close cousins, Leonid, Lev, and Isai Friedmans, who was killed when they were in army on front.
My name is B. Bergerman, and I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1932. And I would like to light a candle in memory of my grandfather, Julius Leiser.
My name is Izali Zemtsovsky. I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, and currently a resident of Walnut Creek, California. Lighting a candle of blessed memory my father, Joseph Zemtsovsky, my uncle, Zalman Pechatnikov, my great aunt, Fruma Berezin, who was burnt out alive together with her 5 kids. May their memory live forever.
I'm Berkeley City Council member Susan Wingraff. Now I would like to tell you something about our distinguished survivor, Dr. Miriam Tasini. Miriam was a practicing psychoanalyst and professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine and president of the American College of Psychoanalysts prior to her retirement. In her book, Where Are We Going?, Dr. Tasini has chronicled the odyssey and ordeal of her family's survival during World War II. Miriam's is a different story about survival than most of the stories we hear. It's not about the horrors of the death camps, death marches, or concentration camps in Germany. Instead, Miriam's story is about 2 little girls and their mother escaping from Krakow, Poland on September 1st, 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland, and fleeing east into the part of Poland that quickly came under Soviet rule, they were deported to a Soviet labor camp in Siberia. And for more than a year, where her extended family confronted very harsh conditions They were faced with illness and near starvation. And then when the Soviets joined the UK against the Germans, they embarked on a journey through Russia, Uzbekistan, Iran, and finally reached safety and freedom in Palestine in 1943, 20,000 miles and 3.5 years after fleeing from Krakow. The courage, resourcefulness, and tenacity of Miriam's family to keep their little girls alive and to survive during this harrowing time is truly remarkable and inspiring. It is now my privilege to introduce Dr. Miriam Tasini, our distinguished survivor of this year's Holocaust Remembrance Day program. Please join me in welcoming her.
I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this story about my survival as a small child in World War II. I wrote a book about it. It's a story of starting out in Krakow, Poland, escaping east from the Germans, and going and then being imprisoned in Russia, in the Gulag. In Krakow, we lived in a beautiful house overlooking the river. And in September 1939, my parents heard the explosions of the Germans' bombings, and there was a fire in a factory across the river. So they decided that maybe it wasn't safe to stay in Krakow longer. As we started out, the Germans were already advancing. So the roads were crowded and there's no way we could go south. So we decided to go east. And my parents were going, my mother and my uncle decided to go east. And as we were driving, we came within 6 or 8 hours after we started driving, we ran out of fuel. The following morning, there was no transportation. My resourceful mother somehow found a farmer who had a horse-driven carriage in which he carried vegetables, and he was going to go to Lvov, where my mother wanted to go. So in this horse-drawn carriage with vegetables, potatoes, all of us, my mother and my sister and I, were taken to Lvov. When we got to Lvov, it was at this point also already taken over by the Russians because, as all of you might remember, when the war started, the Germans invaded Poland from the west side and the Russians invaded it from the east side. So they made halfway at the river walk. My parents never thought the war would last very long. It was always the idea that it would be over very soon. My father stayed behind because he was in charge of the factories and the bakeries and the business. So he stayed behind. Then when he arrived there were German soldiers. And the German soldier he came up to the German soldier who was standing in front of the building, and he said, "My name is Marcus Maximilian Finder, and I own this place." The German said to him, and exactly, I'll just read it, "This is now the property of the German Reich, and a Jew like you is not allowed to step on it." I don't know how they knew he was a Jew, but they did. "We've seen Jewish criminals like you in our country, and now they're gone, and they can no longer contaminate our land, and you will never be allowed to come here again." So, and he placed a yellow star on my father's chest. My father was very upset, but he thought, well, the best thing for him to do was to try to escape and join his wife and the children. So he went into the house they owned and opened the safe they had and took out all the money and all the jewelry, which is what eventually helped us survive the war. He called his cousin Ziggy, who was sort of his cousin but also his best friend. But he and Ziggy decided to travel together and to go east. And they came to the Bug River, which is the river that between the Russian communist part of Poland and the German part of Poland. But as they started swimming through the river, the Germans on one side of the other side of the river started shooting at them and shot my father into his right hand. My father was in a lot of pain, but continued to try to swim, and Ziggy helped him, and they got across the river. He got to Lvov, and by that time, his wound has been infected, and he developed what we call gangrene. And eventually, to make a very long story much shorter, he was hospitalized and stayed in the hospital, and he had to have his hand amputated. And for the rest of his life, and I remember that very well, my father had no right hand, just as a little piece of his elbow left. And what I do remember, that he eventually came to the apartment that we lived in Lvov. He would sit at the table and try to learn how to write with his left hand. And I remember he's taking pieces of paper and tearing them up. I assumed that something went wrong. March of 1940, the Russians declared that the Polish population living in the part that the Russians invaded are sort of criminals. They are not somebody that they want to be staying there. So almost 1 million Poles, including us as Jews and all other Jews, were deported to Siberia. Then what I remember, and it's hard to forget that, somebody was knocking on the door, and they told us to get everything we have, and we're going to go. They took us to the train station. And at the train station, there was a train, and it was not a passenger train, it was a train, it was cattle cars. And there were lots and lots of people. It was a very crowded station. And as we were walking around, my father found his sister and their husband and their daughter. And that family we remained with them for the rest of the war. So they took us together to Siberia, where we all lived in the middle of the forest. We arrived at this station near in Siberia, and we had to walk through the forest. And even as a small child, I do remember my mother holding my hand, and as we were walking through the forest, it was a difficult walk, and I would kind of slip and fall, and she would pick me up. And we got to Siberia, and we were told that all the people have to work. And all the men had to work, and all the women had to work. But my father couldn't work because he didn't have a right hand. So he became a mail delivery person. And every morning he would have to go to the next town, which was about 6 miles each way, and pick up the mail and come back. So he would pick up the mail and then bring it to where we were. My uncle was forced to go into the forest and chop trees. My aunt, like most women, had to go into the forest and pick up berries and fruit. My parents always told me about the potatoes and cabbage that they grew in Siberia. At some point, my mother traded a silk dress that she had for a chicken. So we had actually for two chickens. So we had two chickens, and each day, whenever the chickens would lay one or two eggs, my mother would cook the eggs, and we would split the eggs between three children. Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill met and negotiate a relationship, and they all declared war on Germany. So at that point, the Germans were invading Russia, and it was really a terrible time for Russia because the Germans invaded all of the eastern part of Russia. No, I'm sorry, the western part of Russia, where most of the food came from. So most people in Russia were starving. And we decided that we were going to go towards the part where the Polish government was planning to form an army. And the Russian encouraged the Polish government to do that. So we took the train to Samarkand, and we were very hungry. There was no food. Also, it was very difficult to find a place to stay, to live in. And what happened, and I still remember that we were walking in Samarkand up and down those streets. We would knock on the door of the courtyard, and someone would open. And I don't know how many times they did it, but I remember at least one or two. And somebody would open the door and say, "What do you want?" They said, "We want an apartment." And they said, are you Jews? And if you said, "Yes, we are," they locked the door. But then somehow they found out that the Polish army is actually being formed in a place called Kermine. And we were starving. Every morning, my uncle would leave really early, and it turns out it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, to go and wait in line to get some food. And I remember he's bringing sort of small loaves of bread and cutting it up and giving it to the three little girls. But when we got to Kermine, both my father and mother and my uncle would not be accepted into the army, a Polish army, which was what the Polish army and their families were going to leave Russia. And my parents really wanted to leave. And my father was an amputee, and my uncle was too old. I don't know how old he was, but he was probably 50. They wouldn't take him into the army, or maybe they wouldn't take him to the army because he was a Jew. But my father was walking along near the army places, and suddenly he ran into an old high school friend. This friend said, "What can I do for you?" And my father said, "Well, we're trying to get out of Russia." So he said, "Okay, I'll adopt your wife as my sister." And that's essentially what he did. So we got to a place called Krasnovorsk, near the Caspian Sea, and tried to get on this boat. And this was terrible because there were thousands of people waiting to get on one little boat. It was very crowded, and there was There were no toilets, and we kind of had to sit on the top of the boat, of the ship. And so it took about 8 hours to go across this Caspian Sea, and we ended up in what was then called Persia, which is now Iran. We got to the port in Persia, and there were all these trucks, British soldiers. It was trucks waiting for us with food. It was the first food that I remember getting something warm soup after months of starvation. So they took us to a refugee camp. Unfortunately, what happened as we got to the camp, I became very ill. I had fever and eventually became unconscious. And the British doctor that saw me said, "Oh, she has malaria." So my parents took me to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital, they put me on the top floor, which was a place where you put the dying children. My parents came the next morning, and I was unconscious, and they tried to take me out, and they wouldn't let them. My parents came back, and it was dark, and they stole me out of the hospital. And once again, there was this very sick little child, dying child. And there was a doctor at the camp who said, "Well," he said, "we don't have any medication here. You've got to go out and find it or buy it." So my parents looked around, and there was somebody who did, it was black market, who could sell them the medications for a lot of money. So what my aunt did, she had a diamond wedding ring. She sold that ring and got the money and bought the medication. So that's how I survived. My father was an expert at merchandising food. And so the British found out that that's what he could do. And the Iranians were also needed somebody to help them. So my father was hired by the Iranian Shah, the king, to help negotiate the British and the Iranians, so the Iranians can supply food to the British army. So my father was in charge of that. He became like the head of the food supplies for the British. So we lived in this very comfortable place in Tehran, but my parents sat down, we were there for almost a year, and decided that wasn't a good place to raise their children, particularly daughters, because the women would have covered faces, they were mostly Muslim, and so they decided that they were going to join the Jewish agency, and the Jewish agency at that point was collecting all the people in the camps who were Jewish and trying to get them to Palestine. The British allowed that. The Jewish Federation managed to get a ship, and they allowed, I don't remember how many people it was, but this was again, it wasn't a boat for fancy people. It was a ship that carried, I don't know, supplies, food supplies. So we were loaded onto the ship, down in the bottom of the ship, and it was a difficult place to travel in. We traveled around south from Iran down to around Saudi Arabia. And I have an interesting memory of it. We stopped at one of the ports in Saudi Arabia, and there were men walking and carrying bananas. And my mother bought some bananas and gave me the banana. And I said to her, "Banana? What's a banana?" And she said to me, "Don't you remember you used to eat it when you was a little girl in Poland?" And I had no idea. We traveled up the Suez Canal, and I remember that very clearly, eventually landing at the end of Suez, which was then at the border of Palestine. And essentially, we were taken off the boat, and onto the buses. And I remember traveling on the bus through the southern part of Palestine at that time. It's the Negev, and going up and then seeing this amazing country, which was then, as you got out of the desert, you came into this wonderful green areas. That's the end of that particular part of my life. And I grew up in Palestine, Israel, Krakow to Lvov, then from Lvov to Siberia, from Siberia to Samarkand, from Samarkand to Persia, and from Persia all the way around the Saudi Arabia and the Indian Ocean and up the Suez Canal. It's hard to do that. Both my parents, my mother, my father, my aunt and uncle, they were just resilient. That's the best way to describe them, resilient. They managed to survive not just for themselves, but for 3 little children, and go through starvation and provide food just for the children. And that's about all I can tell you. That's really what's so amazing about those people. One of the reasons that I'm doing this and talking to you about it, I went to Poland for the first time after the war. And one of the places I went to was Auschwitz. Now, I still can't even think about or talk about it without feeling very upset. I want to cry right now. And what I really saw that stimulated me that I have to do something about it was the boxes and boxes and boxes of children's shoes, because they killed thousands and thousands of children. And I said, that shouldn't ever happen again and should never be forgotten. And that's what I've been doing, trying, even though I had my career, professional life, success, 2 good marriages, 3 children, I still want to make sure that no one forgets about the Holocaust and that we all do something about it, and that should never be forgotten.
I'm Evelyn Apte. I was born in Germany in 1929, and I'm lighting this candle in memory and in memory of my aunt Hilda Grodnauer, who was murdered in Auschwitz.
My name is Roma Barilko. I was born in Ukraine, city of Zhytomyr. I would like to light the candle for family of my mother. Family contain my two aunts, Fira and Zina, and my niece, Sveta, Lara, and the small one, I forget her name. I would like the candle for memory, my family forever.
My name is Ruth Spencer. I was born in Czechoslovakia, in Karlsbad, Czechoslovakia. I grew up in Mannheim, and in Germany and in France. I would like light a candle in memory of my mother, Elvira Davidovich, killed in Auschwitz, and of my grandmother.
Я Симван Гишвалинер. Рождение 25 октября 1934 года в Днепропетровске, ныне город Днепро. Украина. Я хочу поставить, зажечь свечу в память о моих родных, бабушке Рахиль, ее дочери, моя тетя Циля, замужем, фамилия Полох, ее детей, 14 лет Вениамин, 12 лет Миша, 9 лет Софа. Это мои два брата и сестра. Хочу поставить эти свечи в память, еще раз повторяюсь, в память, чтобы всегда они остались с нами, в нашей семье. Все.
I was born in Berlin, Germany in 1928. I am lighting candles for my father who died in Auschwitz, for my grandmother, Miriam Tasini, who committed suicide before she was deported, and for my best friend, Lottie Hoffman.
My name is Charlene Stern. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, the first of 3 children to my survivor parents. And I am lighting this candle in memory of all my mother's family, her parents, her sisters, brothers, aunts and uncles, all of them.
My name is Ben Stern, and I was born 1921. The candle represents my whole family, my father, my mother, my grandmother, my brother, sister, and nieces, nephews, cousins. I had a huge family, and it's geblieben just the one who believed.
So that is why we light the candle.
Good day, everyone. My name is Corinna Gould. I'm the tribal chair for the Confederated Villages of Lisjan Nation. The language I just spoke to you in is the Chochenyo language. My great-grandfather, Jose Guzman, was one of the last speakers of the language fluently. Today, I sit in this place called the Bay Area right across from San Francisco, California, a place that my ancestors had lived for thousands and thousands of years. I come here with an open heart and very humbled to be asked to be a part of this Remembrance Day, remembrance of a horrible time in history. I remember this time in history, not that I was around, but that it connects to our people here in California. Our ancestors were enslaved at Mission Dolores in San Francisco and Mission San Jose in Fremont, California. A wave of what is now called genocide, an erasure of people, happened for hundreds of years with the Spanish colonization and the Mexican Rancho period, and then the creation of California, which made it legal to hunt down my ancestors. My heart goes out to those that have survived this Holocaust, and also to those that are the descendants of those, just like I am, that we hold those historical traumas in our bloodlines, and that we are also here to celebrate the miraculous way that we have survived, that our cultures and our languages are here, that we are able to have a spiritual connection with our lands and our languages, and that you too have those spiritual connections still. We welcome our relations that are from the Jewish communities that work with us to protect our sacred sites in our homelands, that create ways to connect with us as Indigenous people to be able to talk about our survival and our thrivance. And thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this day of remembrance, as remember our ancestors and those future generations to come.
Hello, my name is Naomi Katz, and I was born in New York. I am lighting a candle in memory of my mother, my beloved mother, Gloria Gray Katz. And you see in the background my daughter kissing my mother because she's very loved and missed by all of us.
My name is Anne Aronov. I light a candle in memory of my great-grandfather, Aaron, who was killed in a pogrom in the Ukraine.
Hi, my name is Gennady Mikityansky. I was born in Kharkov, Ukraine. I want to light these candles in a blessed memory of my grandfather, Leiba Mikityansky, and a blessed memory of my wife's grandfather, Joseph Harovsky.
My name is Dina Bookstein, and I was born in Detroit, Michigan. More than 1.5 million children were among those killed. Their dreams and their future potential lost forever. I light my candle in memory of many cousins of the Borowitz, Jivanovich, and Margulies families who never had the chance to grow up.
My name is Susan Wingraff. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Today I remember Walter Wingraff, Oscar Wingraff, Gisela Wingraff, and Helene Wingraff, who all perished in the Holocaust.
Gewen amol is a Städtel auf ein Breck von einem Nester in Tal, eingewickt in Chalimes, gewen es a Städtel amol. Da lebt sich dort jeden Wieden mit Freuden und Eiges und so. Von deures verwurzelte Täuschchen, gewann es a Städtel amol. Und Freuen gesungen dort Lieder von Liebes mit Augen verbängt. Und den Kinder zerweigerte Stiefel, sich meistens von Schäden der erzählt. Und soll hat der Städtel Svinjetschke, Chatsch, kleiner und blecher mit der Zeit, gesponnen dem gildenem Faden von Sedes und Babes und Beid.
My name is Tamara Etkina. I was born in Moscow. I would like to light the candle for memory of my uncles, the last name, the Amromin. It is brother of my mom. And my another uncle, husband of my aunt. Everybody killed in battlefield during the World War II. They were very young.
My name is Zinovi Etkin. I was born in Moscow in July 1937. I want to light the свеча in memory of my uncle Feldman Boris. He was killed during World War II.
My name is Eva Nadai. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, and I am lighting the candle in memory of my grandparents who were found in hiding in Budapest, taken to the Danube River and shot into the river. And let me add, about 50 of my and my husband's families all over Hungary.
My name is Marika Somogy. I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1933. And I would like to light these candles for some of the people, my relatives who perished in the Holocaust. I'm not going to read all their names. And I'm going to read their names in the Hungarian way, which is first comes the family name and then the given name. So first, I light the candle for my grandmother, Steiner Janka, and her brother, Dr. Steiner Richard, and his wife, Mariska. My other uncle, Steiner Arpad, who was murdered with his whole family. Also, for Königsberg Kata and Königsberg Jutsi. There are so many more, but I don't want to take up more time. May their memories stay alive.
I am Laszlo Somogy. I was born in Budapest, and I would like to light the candle, first of all, for my three grandparents, Somogy Gyula and his wife, Löwy Regina, who were both perished in Auschwitz, and my grandmother on my mother's side, Bizo Irene. Also, I like to say that Baja was a small city, and I visited recently, and there is a memorial for the local Jews who perished in that town. And since I spent my summers visiting with my grandmother, I saw 33 persons who were close to me who all perished and were listed in this memorial. So among this long list, I just like to mention two of my little cousins who were less than 4-year-old at the time when they were shot right there on the spot. Another Marika Somogy and Ildiko Somogy.
Hello, my name is Herta Weinstein. I was born in Vienna in 1927. And I'm lighting this candle in memory of my father, Paul.
Hello, I'm Hannah Weisman. I'm the executive director of the Magnes collection of Jewish art and life, and I'm the granddaughter and grandniece of Holocaust survivors, as well as the granddaughter of a liberator. My grandmother, Ruth, my father's mother, was the second eldest of 8 children in Garbatka, a small village in rural Poland. She and her sister Edja survived forced labor in munitions factories and incarceration at Auschwitz-Birkenau, largely, as it's told in the family, as a result of my grandmother's chutzpah. After liberation, Ruth and Edja met and married a pair of cousins from the city of Radom, my grandfather Saul and great-uncle Nathan. Saul had served in the Polish cavalry, and when the German army captured his unit, they instructed Jewish soldiers to identify themselves. Recognizing the danger, Saul chose to remain silent, and then he spent the remainder of the war on a farm in Germany as a POW. Saul's sister Paula had left Poland for France in 1938, where she married a Frenchman who was deported and killed in a concentration camp. She later married an American serviceman and subsequently helped facilitate my grandparents' emigration to the United States in 1949. My mother's father, William Mendelsohn, whom I knew as Pop, voluntarily enlisted in the US Army in August 1943 when he turned 18. In the spring of 1945, he helped liberate the concentration camp Mittelbau-Dora, also known as Nordhausen, in Germany. Frustrated by what they perceived as inaction from their superiors, William and his friends took it upon themselves to write letters for the survivors to present to the military government so that they could receive aid. I did not know my grandpa Saul because he died a few months before I was born, and my grandma Ruth and Pop rarely spoke about their Holocaust experiences, and never without being asked. But the ways in which they navigated the world created a legacy of tenacity and striving to be just and kind that my siblings and I have the honor of carrying forward. Grandma Ruth was a small woman of few words, but she knew her mind and could convey her opinions and expectations seemingly telepathically. The Yiddish engraving that my father and his sister chose for her headstone describes her perfectly. Strong like iron. She had a tireless work ethic and high standards for everything and everyone. Pop was a large, gregarious raconteur who loved art, music, and poetry, and had space in his heart for everyone he met. He laughed easily and always had a joke ready, and he was effusive in his love for and pride in his grandchildren. And now, my 4 siblings and I are a tenacious bunch with a fierce sense of justice. Each of us, in our own wildly diverse ways, is constantly striving to be an upstander, to be a mensch. And now I see in my nieces and nephews, the 4th generation, a deep respect for the intrinsic worth of every single person and a sense of responsibility to the natural world. I'm proud that they are now part of this legacy. Thank you for listening to my family's story and for participating in this important observance.
My name is Galina Ostrovskaya. I was born in Ekaterinburg, Russia. I light this candle for my memory, my aunt Katya, Anya, my grandmother Sophia.
My name is Edith Hein, and I like to put a candle up for the 24 family members who were murdered by the Nazis. And I was born in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I also want to put a candle up for my parents, Leo and Ernie Levy.
Мое имя Александр Македонский. Я родился в Днепропетровске на Украине. Я хочу зажечь свечи в память о моих родственниках. Это моя мама Хая, мой папа Моисей, мой брат Валерий и моя тетя Исфирь.
My name is Yudi Sofa. I born in Ukraine, city Dnipro now. I light this candle in memory of my father, Gaisinski Usher, and my grandfather, Gaisinski Isaac.
My name is Judy Glazer. I was born in England. I'm lighting this candle in the memory of my paternal grandfather, Jakub Meyer Namiot from Łódź, Poland, and 7 of my paternal grandmother, Ina's siblings from Warsaw and across Poland.
My name is Stuart Florsheim. I was born in New York City. I'm lighting my candle in memory of my grandfather, Samuel Falk, who was interred in Dachau and was fortunately released. My grandfather, grandmother, mother, and uncle fled to New York.
Hello, my name is Robin Keller. I live in Kensington, California. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. I'm lighting this candle in memory of my father, Ernest Keller, and his brother, Robert Keller, and their parents, Victor and Amalia. And in memory of all of their extended family, of grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, who all perished in the Holocaust.
My name is Mark Geliebter. I live in Kensington, California. I was born in Frankfurt, Germany after the war, and I'm lighting the candle in memory of my survivor parents, Leib and Bella Geliebter, and all of my grandparents, uncles, aunts, and extended family from Płock and Piotrków, Poland, who all perished in the Shoah.
A small group of very passionate volunteers have been planning and producing this program now for 20 years. I think the City of Berkeley is the only city that sponsors a Holocaust Remembrance Day program like this one. Today, we come together as a community to honor the 6 million Jews, as well as members from many other targeted groups murdered during the Holocaust. On this day, we call on everyone to remember those who were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, and to commemorate the survivors, and to condemn Holocaust denial and distortion, and to communicate the facts and educate people, and to commit to working to prevent similar atrocities from happening in the future. Year after year, we produce this program. But now, almost 80 years after the start of World War II, time is running out for our first-hand storytellers. And so the obligation falls on us to pass down the truth about what happened during those darkest years, to keep the memory alive. We pass the stories on to our children and our grandchildren. And now, especially in light of increasing acts of hate and anti-Semitism taking place throughout the world, we plead with them to never forget, to speak out, to not stand by in silence. Tribal leader Corinna Gould reminds us that the United States has its own ugly history, and I thank her for her compassion for and support of our efforts today to remember the genocide against the Jews of Europe. I am reminded of the words of former President Barack Obama. An attack on any faith is an attack on all of our faiths. It is an attack on our diversity, on the very idea that people of different backgrounds can live together and thrive together. We can confront the forces of hate, and together we can be stronger. Listening to Hannah Weisman's story of her grandparents and how their strength and courage has influenced the values of the grandchildren in her family, passed on from generation to generation, gives us comfort and hope for a better world. And how lucky we are to hear the story of our honored survivor, Dr. Miriam Tasini, of her family's 20,000-mile journey from Nazi-invaded Poland to safety and freedom in Palestine 3.5 years later. The resourcefulness and determination of her family to keep their 3 young girls alive, protecting them from starvation and disease, and their will and courage to keep moving until they found safety is truly an inspiration. Over the many years that I have participated in the planning of Holocaust Remembrance Day, what I have learned is that in the face of the most horrendous violations of human dignity and extraordinary suffering, strength and courage and moral conviction can endure. In an increasingly divided world where disinformation and fake news fuel hatred against minorities, educating new generations about the Holocaust is more important than ever. We all have a responsibility to preserve the memory of all victims and their suffering. We owe it to those who lost their lives. We owe it to those who survived. And we owe it to our future generations. Thank you for joining us today.